As human beings, we do not form our self-assessments based on our standing in the world. We form our self-assessments based on our standing in our immediate circle. So I didn't get into my top choice university, but here I am 3 years later making YouTube videos, still in school, and honestly happy that I didn't get into my top choice. Now, believe me, when you first get that rejection letter, it's hard not to feel like your life is over and it's the end of the world and you're the ultimate failure, but I'm here to tell you that it's not all that bad. Today, I'm going to prove to you using hard facts, reasoning, and statistics that if you didn't get into your top choice, it's not a huge deal. There's so much more that goes into your university or college than just where you go to school, believe me. Now, if you're looking for consolation, YouTube is honestly the worst place you can go to try and cheer yourself up. There are so many videos out there of people freaking out over getting into their Ivy League school, or telling you about how great it is to be at Harvard or the top school in the country or whatever it is, and YouTube is just a bad place to go to see what the reality is like. The reality is that 95% of the applicants applying to one of these top schools isn't gonna get in. And people on the internet don't want to hear that you failed, they don't want to hear that the competition beat you, and they don't want to hear that now you're a shell of your former self because you failed. They want to hear, what's the formula? How can I get in? But none of it matters. Now, I know from experience when I was looking at engineering schools in high school, there was really only one school that I actually cared about. And I would say that for a lot of people, this tends to often be the case. Well, now that I've been in university for 3 years after not getting into my top choice, I find my whole obsession with that kind of funny. Now, back in the day, my advisors had told me to apply to a bunch of backup schools just in case I didn't get into my top choice, and I did. But I knew deep down that I would never have to worry about those other schools. And then reality hits. So back in my high school days, before I got all of my acceptances and my one denial, I wish somebody had told me about this, and it has to do with odds. If a particular school is ranked your top choice because it's the best school in the country, guess what? You're not alone. You can bet that you're going to be competing with thousands of other students to get into a very small number of spots in that top school. And in recent years here in Canada, depending on who you ask, the top engineering school is either U of T or Waterloo. I applied to both of these schools and I did get into U of T, but I also applied to Waterloo, just like 11,999 other people. There were literally 12,000 applicants for 1,000 spots at Waterloo. I still think this might be the most applicants in any given year at Waterloo that there has ever been, and well, what do you know, that's just my luck. But even though I got into U of T, which is considered one of the top schools, I didn't end up going there either. Now, this might seem kind of stupid to some of you. Why, if you got into one of the top schools, would you choose consciously to not go there? Like, are you crazy? Well, maybe a bit, but I do stand by my decision. Your university life isn't just about going to the best school. There are so many other things to consider. But if I'm being honest, asking 18-year-olds to choose which school they want to go to is asking them which person is hotter. The decision is definitely not going to be made using your brain. Hotness will always win, and at the time, Waterloo was looking damn sexy. Now, I'm not saying that every 18-year-old doesn't know what they want to do. There were some kids in my high school who were super geniuses, and they might end up being the prime minister or working at NASA one day. But I will say that I thought I knew everything when I was in high school, and I thought I was a genius. But now, after being in university for 3 years, I realized that I was an idiot back then, and I also realized that I'm still an idiot today, but I've come one step further because at least now I know that I'm an idiot. So why does any of this matter? Why did I decide not to go to U of T, and where did I go instead? So let me break down my decision-making process for you. One of the most important things I used to help me decide which university to go to was, can I see myself physically at that location, at that university? I think that it's super important to go and take a tour of every university that you're considering. Check out the campus, check out all the facilities that they have, check out the vibe of the place, see if it rocks with you or not. Just figure out if it's the kind of place you can see yourself being for at least the next 4 years if you're living away from home. Some universities are in big cities, some universities are in smaller towns, so it's really up to what you like and what you would prefer. So that's exactly what I did. I went and toured U of T, I went and toured Waterloo, and I went and toured McMaster University. And the main reason that I ended up not going to U of T was because it was in Toronto, and I've grown up in the suburbs my entire life, and I didn't really like the big city vibes all that much. So I decided that I wouldn't go to U of T, and I chose to go to McMaster instead because it's a bit more of a smaller city, and it's something that I was more comfortable with. I also just generally liked McMaster's campus better and the location, and the second metric I used for deciding which school to go to was co-op or internships. U of T does have a co-op program for their engineering students, but it's only a 1-year long co-op, and it's at the end of either your second or third year, right before you graduate. Meanwhile, McMaster allows you to do a co-op essentially whenever you want for however long you want. You can do it in the fall, you can do it in the winter, you can do it in the summer, you can do 4 months, you can do 8 months, you can do 12 months, you can do 16 months. I loved the freedom and the flexibility of the McMaster co-op program, which is again a big reason why I chose to go there instead of U of T. However, now that I know how co-op works, I could very well have gone to U of T and gotten about the same results as I'm getting now, but instead at U of T, I could have just applied to regular summer jobs that regular students get, and then done my final year internship at a company. But at the time, I thought that I would be a super smart person, I'd get the best grades, and I would be super motivated to apply to every single company and get a job. But that just wasn't the case. In my first summer, I worked as a landscaper for the summer, and then in my second year, the pandemic hit. Any of the jobs that I was applying to just disappeared off the face of the earth. I ended up working as an independent web developer, and I built a website or two. But I think the biggest reason that I didn't get a co-op in my first 2 years is because I just didn't apply to enough places. You have to apply to so many jobs if you really want to get that co-op. The third thing that made me choose McMaster over U of T was that I liked their engineering facilities for undergraduates a lot more. When I went to tour U of T, it seemed like they catered a lot more towards graduate students, so if I do a master's, I'm definitely going to try and go to U of T. And the final thing that made me choose McMaster was, of course, the mechatronics engineering program. U of T doesn't have a mechatronics program, so that essentially sealed the deal for McMaster because I knew that I wanted to be a mechatronics engineer. One thing that I don't think anyone really tells high school students when they're applying to a university is that your education is going to be pretty much the same regardless of where you go to school. So long as you go to a school that's accredited by the Canadian Engineering Accreditation Board, you will learn essentially the same thing under their requirements no matter what the university is. So just by nature of going to one of these accredited schools, you are hitting all of the requirements you need to be a good engineer. So when you think about it, since there are so many great schools in countries like Canada and the United States and the United Kingdom and Europe, ranking is really some of the least important things you should be worried about. However, that being said, there is obviously a very small advantage to going to one of the top schools. For example, Waterloo has the highest rate of co-op job success in Canada and an extremely high employment rate in your field after graduation. And if there's one school in Canada that you should go to if you really want to work in the United States, I would say that's Waterloo. But that doesn't mean that you can't go out there yourself, apply to these companies, and try and get a job in the USA. Outside of some small differences, I would say that pretty much every engineering school in Canada is somewhat similar when it comes to the education, so that is probably one of the least important things to be worried about. Going to one school or another won't make it easier for you to find a job, even if you go to Waterloo. The students there don't sit on their ass and get jobs handed to them. At Waterloo, students have to apply to an average of 65 jobs just to get their first year internship. I didn't apply to nearly that many jobs in my first year, and I really didn't use the resources that I should have been using to try and get myself a job. It takes consistency, determination, effort, and extracurriculars to actually land you that job. What you actually learn in your classes is maybe 20% of what an employer wants to see on your resume. The school that you go to really doesn't matter. It's going to be up to you to match the skills that you need with the skills that an employer wants and then build up those skills on your resume. 90% of your education is going to be theory-based, some of it's going to be outdated, and you're only going to have a few labs where you do actual hands-on application of concepts. So it's pretty much all on you to build a good resume, build up work experience, build up experience doing projects, and extracurriculars. It's your job to go out there and meet the right people that can get you connected with the company that you want to work for. I know that as a high school student, it's really hard to believe that the school you go to doesn't matter, but it's honestly just the hard truth. Now let's say you do get into one of the top schools, what's your advantage? The biggest, if not the only advantage, is that you're going to be surrounded by people who are better than you. I know this sounds a little bit backwards, but hear me out. Since everybody at that school is almost inevitably going to be smarter than you, you can take this one of two ways. This will either motivate you to work your butt off and compete against them, or this will completely kill your motivation and make you feel inadequate. And it's all about how you take on competition and how you view this competition. It just so happens that if you go to a top school, you might get a few more highly motivated students that really bring up the rest of the class, making that school look really good. But if you're someone at the bottom of the class or someone who didn't even get into that school, that doesn't mean you're not smart. And in fact, sometimes I would even recommend not going to a top school so that you can be more motivated as the top 10% of the 5th ranking school rather than the bottom 10% of the top ranking school. I watched this video recently from one of my favorite authors, Malcolm Gladwell, which talks about this psychological theory called relative deprivation theory. And he states that as human beings, we do not form our self-assessments based on our standing in the world. We form our self-assessments based on our standing in our immediate circle. I really like that quote, and I think it makes an amazing psychological argument for why you might be better off as the top 10% of the 5th ranking school. Whatever your outcome, I want you to remember that you are always in control of your journey. It is up to you to define the kind of person that you want to be. Don't let yourself be defined by the place that you go to school. If you surround yourself with highly motivated people, you will be able to do incredible things. Work on achieving your goals and tying your self-worth to what you can bring to the table and your accomplishments rather than the place that you go to school. I really hope that sharing this story lets you see university from a different perspective and that it's not the end of the world if you don't get into your top choice. Thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.